The views expressed on this podcast are ours alone and do not reflect the views of our employers.
Evolution of evil.
I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep. That's when they would be strangled.
Do you have a boyfriend?
No.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
Evil is not spurned. Evil is thought of as a spirit that needs help.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.
Evolution of evil.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the True Crime Podcast, Evolution of Evil, the show that delves into the dark side of humanity, from the most heinous of crimes to the minds of history's most notorious criminals. We explore weekly the depths of evil, uncovering its evolution over time and understanding the dark motivations behind it. That is why we're all here, the puzzle that is the human brain. We continue to look at events from the past and the present and see how evil has adapted and changed over the centuries. Please remember to subscribe and rate this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow the show on Twitter at Evolution of EVI2, as well as our personal accounts. He is at Justin Yen. I am at TC91. Justin, a lot of things to talk about before we get started here. First of all, we officially have our first episode over 100 downloads. Now, that may not sound like a big deal for the listeners out there, but for us who are doing this just because we want to, there's no advertising behind it, no budget behind it whatsoever. It's a big deal to us. Your Danny Rowling your Danny Rowling episode is at 100. Oh, sweet Belle Gunnis, episode number 1, trailing in at 98. So it seems that we're growing this little community. I enjoy that.
You know, it's funny because that means 96 other people than my family actually listened to the episode. So
that's crazy. Yeah.
It's kind of nice.
Also, this past weekend, this past Saturday, we had a 12-hour stream marathon benefit for Josh Odom and his family. We had an auction going on. We had all these different shows. This one wasn't on it, but we were on it. And a lot of money was raised. I can tell you that as of this recording, most of the bid payments have been made. Only a handful are left, and we have eclipsed $16,000 in total donations made. So, again, thanks to everyone who participated in that, who has donated. And I had a lot of fun doing it, but I also hope I'll never have to do anything like that ever again.
Yeah, it definitely was a good cause, but for a sad reason, right?
Yes.
And ultimately, I'm glad that we were able to help out a family that has that needs it, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, Josh was a great guy, and I'm glad I got to meet him and have a small part of his life that I got to know. So,
yeah, he was a great guy, and he will be missed. You don't replace a guy like Josh. So, I could not be happier that all of us came together in the way that we have and helped his family in the fashion that we have. I mean, it's really nice to see. But now moving on, you're getting greedy. You're going to try to shove two shows into this one. And,
we will see, and if not, we will make this a 2-part episode.
Yes. So, what are we going to talk about this week?
Well, this week, like he had kind of alluded to, is a twofer, and special in the fact that we're covering some murders from my hometown of Tampa, Florida, and incorporating a listener's request. We'll get into the latter of the two later in the show, but let's get started and go back 33 years. The year was 1989. The tranquil waters of Tampa Bay, Florida was a silent witness to a chilling act that sent shockwaves across the nation. Tonight, we will delve into the life and crimes of the man behind these horrifying acts. That man is Oba Chandler. Let's start where we normally start, TJ. Let's go to where this evildoer's original origin story began. Oba was born in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Of course he was.
October 11th, 1946. His life began at like any other mid-century America. His parents, poster children of the working class, would have never imagined the sinister path their son would tread. A seemingly ordinary childhood was ruptured when Chandler was just 10. His father's suicide, a gruesome act of despair, marked a sad milestone in Chandler's young life. Being just 10, Oba was catapulted into a world steeped in grief and confusion. Unprepared for such loss, he grappled with a sudden void in his life. Tragically, Chandler sought solace in an unseemly place, the underbelly of society, the world of crime. TJ, I know we have talked about previous evildoers and their upbringing. Most of our subjects have had trauma in their childhood, but it's usually around abuse. Can you imagine a parent committing suicide knowing that they would be leaving behind a young child and what impact that would have on them?
No, I can't imagine because, I mean, as a parent of two now, no matter how bad life got, as long as they were still there, no, I can't imagine that thought entering your head. I mean, you have to be in some serious despair to make that thought. Now, do we know how he killed himself?
I don't. I didn't go that deep into it. It's horrific as it is, so I kind of left it at the surface.
I only asked because, what all was he exposed to?
Right.
Now, granted, none of it's good. There's no good scenario on this, but there is varying ranges of terribleness. But I mean, even still, I guess in the grand scheme of things, we're going to discuss, we're not going to get that deep into it. That's not important. So he has this incredible. By the way, I don't know Oba Chandler, so you did it again. But he sees his father commit suicide at a young age, and there's your start.
It is our start. And now that you've asked how he committed suicide, I will be doing some research tonight because I know as soon as Amy hears this episode, that'll be one of her questions. So I'll be prepared to answer that.
I'll do it right now.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So TJ, his first forays into criminality were mild. Petty thefts and the occasional car burglary. In these reckless actions, one might see a child's misguided cry for help, an attempt to command the attention that was perhaps lacking at home. Over time, however, these minor transgressions spiraled into more serious offenses, presenting an escalating pattern of disregard for the law. School records from the time hint at a troubled young man. His academic performance was middling, a reflection not of capability, but of severe lack of interest. Beyond this apathy, a deeper issue lurked. Chandler was quick to anger and often clashed with authority figures. His formative years were marred by regular encounters with the law, as his disdain for societal norms became increasingly apparent. His home life, far from a sanctuary, was another arena of chaos, characterized by instability and dysfunction. It felt like Chandler was in the middle of a storm, being tossed around by forces both inside and outside of his control. To describe Chandler's adolescent years further, the term troublemaker would have probably been a grave understatement. From a young age, he showed a propensity for acts of rebellion and delinquency that set him apart from his peers and siblings. Like mentioned previously, it started with petty thefts, swiping small items from local stores or lifting valuables from unattended vehicles. In many ways, these early forays into crime were less about loot and more about the thrill, the adrenaline rush that came with risk and rebellion.
So we have escalation here early.
Oh, yeah.
And also his father hung himself.
So the trauma's there, right?
Yep.
So as he grew older and also bolder, so did his crimes. Burglaries became a regular occurrence. Chandler's method was to act in the cover of darkness, breaking into houses while the occupants were away. He seemed to have a knack for identifying targets and selecting homes that promised valuable hauls. This period marked a significant escalation in Chandler's criminal behavior, a shift from opportunistic petty theft to premeditated burglary. TJ, you pointed it out.
Boom.
Perhaps the most alarming aspect of Chandler's adolescence was growing disregard for the rights of others. Instances of assault began to pepper his already extensive criminal record. These violent episodes often occurred without incitement, suggesting a worrying lack of impulsive control and escalating propensity for violence. Now, reports from the time suggest Chandler rarely showed remorse for his actions, instead appeared to wear his flourishing criminal reputation as a badge of honor, a sign for his disdain for societal norms he so flagrantly disregarded. This apparent lack of empathy, combined with his escalating criminal activities, painted a worrying picture of the man Chandler was becoming.
You know what this sounds like? Around the same area? Eileen Wuornos.
I was about to say, we've covered them already. So while it's hard to pinpoint the exact motives behind Chandler's adolescence behavior, one can speculate on the role that early life trauma, family dysfunction, and a possible underlying personality disorder may have played. Regardless, these formative years were unquestionably instrumental in molding the man who would later become one of America's most notorious criminals. As his adolescence gave way to adulthood, Chandler's crimes escalated in severity. It was as though minor infractions of his youth were but a prelude, a grisly overture to the horrifying sympathy that was to follow. Now let's flash forward to 1989. Chandler committed an act so monstrous it would forever sear his name into the annals of America's notorious criminals. The Rogers family, which was Mother Joan, who was 36, and her two daughters, Michelle and Christy, 14 and 17, were vacationers from Ohio seeking rest and relaxation in sunny Florida. They had embarked on this trip with dreams of sunshine and sea, little knowing that they would cross paths with a man like Chandler and that this would be their last vacation ever.
Didn't you say he was from Cincinnati?
He was.
And what are the odds that his first victims are also from Ohio?
Crazy. So TJ, on June 1st, 1989, their fates tragically collided. They had been exploring Tampa Bay, taking in scenic sights, when Chandler offered to take them out on a sunset boat tour. Unaware of his sinister intentions, they accepted.
No.
When their bodies were discovered a few days later, the brutal reality of their final moments came to light. Each had been bound, their bodies weighed down by concrete blocks before being tossed overboard while still alive, left to a horrifying, watery death. The sheer brutality of these murders sent shockwaves across the nation. The autopsies revealed haunting details. The bindings of their limbs were the sort used in construction, a detail that would later contribute to Chandler's conviction, as he was known as a worker in the construction trades. There were no signs of significant struggle, which led to speculations about the nature of their final moments, whether they had been coerced or whether they had been powerless in the face of fear. Now, each of these details amplified the monstrousness of Chandler's acts, painting a picture of a man who showed no mercy. The careful, cruel premeditation of his acts and the brutal execution of his plan painted a chilling portrait of a killer devoid of empathy or remorse. Initially, the investigation into the Rogers murders were marred by dead ends. Detectives grappled with a few clues left behind at the crime scene, trying to construct a plausible narrative from the seemingly disconnected pieces of evidence. Chandler, it seemed, had been careful to cover his tracks.
Yeah, we need to discuss this further. So if you're from out of state, going to another state for vacation where you don't know anyone, and a stranger walks up to you and offers you anything, like a boat ride or a car ride tour or whatever the case is, for free, the answer is no. Unless you went to a business that specializes in those things, or you had a tour planned, no, absolutely not.
So I get where you're coming from, But remember, they're from Ohio. People from Ohio are generally nice, right?
Sure.
They assume that everybody's going to be as nice as well.
I'm providing a public service announcement right now.
No, I get you, but I'm trying to giving you the kind of where their heads were probably at. Tampa, people are generally nice as well, and so I'm sure they let their guards down, right?
But
sure,
Timmy C is from Ohio.
Enough said.
Yeah, I mean, right?
Yeah, but no. What I would say is ultimately, I think they let their guard down, and I think he was very charming. I think he knew how to work them. So,
I saw this man's picture when I was looking up the details of his father. This is the most vanilla man I've ever seen in my life. Like, describe a middle-aged white man. Yes, that's what Obed Chandler looks like. Everyone has a guy like that looks like this in the family. Everyone. It's banana how nondescript this. I just said it's banana. It's bananas how nondescript this man is. Nothing remarkable about him.
Yeah. No, and I think that's kind of what helped him, right? Unfortunately for the Rogers. Now, initially, the investigation into their murders was marred by dead ends. Detectives grappled with the few clues left behind at the crime scene, trying to construct a plausible narrative. But seemingly disconnected pieces of evidence. Chandler, it seemed, had been careful to cover his tracks. Persistence, though, paid off. Detectives, driven by their dedication to justice, and I want you to listen to this and think of who this sounds familiar to. Driven by their dedication to justice, clung on to one of the few leads they had, the handwritten directions found in the victim's car. This seemingly mundane piece of evidence held potential. They decided in a bold, unconventional approach, using billboards to display their handwriting.
This has happened a few times.
Yes.
So the most famous one, although it wasn't, it was they were the one that pops in my head immediately. They were actually showing the victims. That was Richard Ramirez. They were showing the sketches of the victims. The handwriting in the handwritten note in the car is, again, it's Eileen Wuornos. What was the other kind of famous billboard case I remember watching?
Wasn't it Son of Sam where they posted like how he wrote?
That was in the newspaper. So that was in the New York Times.
Yeah. But like how he wrote.
I'm sorry. So initially when he first started writing letters, complete sidebar here, because I'm a huge Son of Sam dork. So when he first started writing letters, he was writing them directly to Jimmy Breslin, who was the editor of the New York Post in 1977, 6 or 7. And so that's how that started. Then he started writing them to the cops to antagonize them, allegedly, if you believe there was only one, which I don't, which I do not. I think there was multiple, but neither here nor there.
Well, in this case, the public, upon seeing the billboards, responded with overwhelming support. Tips poured in from across the states, painting a growing portrait of a suspect. It was one such tip from an alert former neighbor that identified Chandler's handwriting, leading the authorities to their prime suspect. This ingenious blend of a traditional police work and innovative public engagement exemplifies the tireless efforts made by law enforcement. Their determination kept the case alive, leading to Chandler's eventual capture and conviction.
Oh, and you know what, too? That's how Richard Ramirez got caught, was they put his sketch in the LA Times. Because he was actually out of state when they announced it. Well, they didn't announce. The LA police did not want to announce. The San Francisco police had to because they had no choice. They announced as Richard Ramirez. He was actually in Arizona. And when he came back, he said he noticed a bunch of people were looking at him on the bus. And when he got off the bus, because he knew something was up, and he got off the bus, and the first store he walked in on, I think it was a bodega, the owner is reading the newspaper, and there's his face. And everyone started pointing and looking. Then he gets his ass beat in the neighborhood.
It's crazy. Now, while the motive behind such heinous acts often remains shrouded in mystery, in Chandler's case, a dark fascination with control and the infliction of pain appeared to be at the fore. These cruel tendencies, when coupled with Chandler's blatant disregard for life and law, created a toxic concoction that culminated in the horrifying fate of the Rogers family. The initial investigation into Rogers' murders was fraught with challenges, with little evidence to go on and a perpetrator adept with covering his tracks. The authorities faced an uphill battle. To talk more about what was left in the car, he left a brochure with handwritten directions in the victim's car. So it wasn't the victim that had the brochure first. He actually, when cleaning up the car, left a brochure with handwritten directions in it. So another slip to where he was able to be his downfall.
So he thought he was being smarter than he really was.
Yep.
Ooh, I know. I'm going to leave this piece of paper with my handwriting and fingerprints on it. They'll never guess. Dummy.
Now, with the prime suspect finally in their sights, the authorities moved swiftly. Chandler was arrested, and the pieces of ghastly puzzle began to align. The case had once seemed almost impenetrable, but now building towards an undeniable conclusion. In 1994, 5 years after the heinous crime, Chandler stood in a court of law, the magnitude of his actions looming ominously over him. The evidence was incontrovertible. The handwriting analysis, combined with other pieces of damning proof, painted a grim portrait of guilt. Following Chandler's arrest, the community breathed a sigh of relief, but this was mixed with an unshakable sense of dread. The details of Chandler's crime had struck a profound chord, echoing the vulnerability of every individual and the unanticipated dangers that could lurk beneath the veneer of an ordinary man. Now, I will say, on a side note, my mom and her girlfriend were both single at the time. And after this man was caught, my mom's girlfriend was going out on a date. And my mom specifically said to her, "What's the guy's name?" Like, literally kind of was grilling her just to make sure, like, ultimately she knew some information about this. Because ultimately, like the Gainesville murders, right?
Yes.
It kind of raises the height of suspicion every time you go out somewhere. Whereas before, you probably thought, hey, we live in a peaceful town. Nothing happens here. This is, nothing to worry about in our town. This rocked Tampa to the core.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically conversations were being had with friends, family members that weren't being had before. So it's quite interesting because when my mom saw we were doing this episode, she was all about telling me the story of her friend and her having a conversation about it. So now, following his arrest, the community breathed a collective sigh of relief, but this was, I think I just read that one, sorry. The jury needed some time to deliberate, so Chandler was found guilty of triple murders and sentenced to death. His reign of terror had finally come to an end, but the scars left by his cruel actions remained, and extremely profound. People grappled with their emotions, relief, rage, sorrow, and a deep-rooted sense of unease. Chandler was not an outsider. He was a man who lived among them and whose children attended local schools. His acts shattered the community's sense of safety and trust, leaving behind deep wounds that would take years to heal, as we just discussed. News of his arrest spread like wildfire, with everyone seemingly having an opinion about his fate. The court trial became the talk of the town, drawing in spectators from far and wide, all curious and horrified about the extent of his cruel deeds. Now, TJ, in the subsequent years after Chandler's conviction, community support groups emerged to assist the healing process. Candlelight vigils were held in memory of the Rogers family, and changes were advocated in local safety measures and law enforcement practices. The horrifying ordeal had galvanized the community, invoking a shared resolve to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. This mirrors almost the entire episode 2, right, where we covered the Gainesville murders.
Yeah.
Now, as Chandler spent his years on death row, the legal and ethical debates around his sentence simmered. Death penalty opponents pointed to his troubled upbringing, suggesting that it was society's failure as much as Chandler's. Proponents of the death penalty, on the other hand, argued that the brutal nature of his crimes made him fully deserving of this fate. Now, I don't know if you know, but Florida teeters with the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. When the execution was finally carried out in 2011, there were mixed emotions. Some felt relief viewing his execution as a closing of a painful chapter. For others, it was a sobering reminder of the irreversible nature of capital punishment.
See, and here's what I don't understand, and this may be controversial, and I'm not intending to be. Strictly from a law standpoint, we can get into the ethics of it later, but strictly from a law standpoint, this man killed 3 people. He was convicted. He was sentenced to death. What else is there to discuss? And I've now, granted, we can go over the ethical debates and all other stuff about the death penalty. I'm not 100% death penalty or pro death penalty, certainly, but I think in cases like this, when it's a slam dunk, because again, he did these 3, and that was it. He was caught. It was that the evidence was that profound. In clear-cut cases like this, you're not going to hear me going, maybe there's another way we should do this. If he is convicted clear-cut that he did this, and the state law says he will now be executed, what are we arguing about? I don't, and again, I don't know. I've never understood the sympathy for the killer. I've never gotten that. Like, again, if you want to talk the ethics of or the law implications of capital punishment, I'm all for it. Again, I'm not all pro capital punishment by any stretch of the imagination, but in some instances, it's I would say it's necessary. And also, it's always blown my mind because you can tell these proponents of the ones that want to be on camera and be on camera, be in front of the microphone and protest this man's case to not be killed. He doesn't give a shit about you. He would kill you the first chance he got. That's what I don't think they truly understand, like the depravity of it. And by the way, what would be more heinous to the most common of people? To either be put to death or to sit at death row for 40 years. You tell me which one's worse.
Yeah, I think sometimes death penalty is just putting them out of their misery right there.
It's putting everyone
not having to think. Yeah. But if you think about it, TJ, so he went to court originally in 1994, right?
Mm-hmm.
The execution wasn't carried out until 2011.
Right.
So that means he had time to appeal and kind of live with himself for what he had done before the execution.
So he was sentenced a year after John Wayne Gacy was killed. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder where Bundy falls in that. Because I don't think Bundy made it through the 90s.
I think he was 91.
Was he? Because I know Berkowitz was well, I think Berkowitz's still alive. And he was convicted in 1978 or 79. Let's see here. Who did it say Ted Bundy?
Yeah,
Dahmer was killed in prison by another prisoner.
So he was actually executed in Rayford, which is a Florida state prison, the day after my birthday in 1989. So you're correct. He did not make it to the 90s.
Oh, Dahmer, yeah. I'm sorry, Bundy.
Bundy.
Yeah. I think Berkowitz might still be alive. Let me find out here. Because I cannot remember, and I've watched that Sons of Sam documentary on Netflix, which you've not watched, so you should. It's excellent. But I bet you I've watched that 4 times now, and I can't remember them. Yeah, he's still alive. 70 this year. Actually, he just turned 70. Sorry, Mom. He has the same birthday as my mom.
Ugh.
June 1st, 1953, although she was born in 59. Wow.
So TJ, his last statement, if any, was not publicly shared, further adding to the enigma that was Oba Chandler. As news of his execution spread, it was met with a subdued reaction, a stark contrast to the public fervor that had accompanied his trial. His death did not provide answers. Instead, it left behind an enduring legacy of a man who personified the darkest depths of human nature. Attempting to delve into the psychological aspects of Chandler's character is akin to navigating a labyrinth shrouded in shadows. Forensic psychology provides us with some possible insights, suggesting an interplay of sociopathy and sadistic tendencies, a deeply ingrained need for power, a desire to dominate, and a perverse satisfaction derived from others' pain. These are often observed in individuals who commit such horrifying acts. Yet caution must be exercised when interpreting these characteristics. While they offer a glimpse into his possible mindset, they cannot and should not be taken as comprehensive explanation for his actions. Human behavior, particularly of this extreme nature, is complex and multifaceted, often eluding complete understanding. Attempting to comprehend Chandler's psyche requires us to tread lightly into the realms of forensic psychology. Some experts post that Chandler may have been driven by a deeply ingrained need for power and dominance. His horrifying acts may have been external manifestation of the internal compulsions. His crimes, characterized by the brutality, suggest a sadistic pleasure in inflicting pain. The sadism is often a component of antisocial personality disorder, a condition marked by a long-term pattern of manipulating, exploiting, or violating the rights of others. If Chandler did suffer from this condition, it may provide some explanation for his heinous actions. It's also worth considering the role of Chandler's childhood experiences in his development. His early exposure to loss and trauma may have set the stage for emotional disturbances later in life. However, while these psychological theories offer potential insights into Chandler's behavior, they should be interpreted with caution. They're not definitive explanations, but rather hypotheses that might help to somewhat illuminate his dark and complex psychological landscape. TJ, in 2011, more than 2 decades after the gruesome murders that shocked Tampa and the entire nation, Oba Chandler was executed. His life, marked by a chilling journey from troubled youth to ruthless killer, serves as a stark reminder of human capacity for evil. Yet Chandler's tale is more than just a chronicle of his deeds. It's also a story of persistence, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to justice. It speaks to the tireless efforts of law enforcement officials who, despite numerous hurdles, never abandoned their pursuit of the truth. In the aftermath of monstrous acts, we are left with haunting question: what drives a man to commit such unthinkable crimes? In the case of Oba Chandler, the answer lies buried with that man, a chilling enigma locked away in the depths of a darkened soul. Now, in reflecting on Chandler's life and the gruesome crimes he committed, we are compelled to grapple with the complexity of criminal behavior, societal responsibility, and the very concept of justice. His story serves as a stark reminder of the inherent potential for evil in humanity, but it also illustrates the enduring resilience of communities, tenacity of law enforcement, and the relentless pursuit of justice. It forces us to ask difficult questions about ourselves and our society. It pushes us to consider how seemingly ordinary man can become capable of such monstrous acts. We've talked about it several times. Are people born this way, or do they become evil over time? It's a chilling reminder of the precarious of trust, the fragility of safety, and the profound impact of individual actions on a community. As we conclude this journey into the life and crimes of Oba Chandler, let us carry with us not only the memory of his horrific deeds, but also the lessons they impact. The perseverance of law enforcement, the power of community solidarity, and the resilience of those touched by this tragedy are beacons of hope in the face of such profound darkness. In the end, it's these aspects of humanity that we should hold on to, and they illuminate the path towards understanding, healing, and justice.
I have some thoughts here as we wrap up Mr. Chandler. So first of all, I don't know why I thought of this, but on the notion of people sympathizing with the killer, if you're one of these people who become groupies of serial killers, you are the biggest variety of clown that there is. Because Richard Ramirez is probably the most prominent example, but Charles Manson had him, Ted Bundy had him. They would eat your face as soon as they got the chance to. I don't know what the attraction is there, but it's buffoonery at its finest. But now, here's what I'm thinking, because we have this mother and two daughters killed, and as far as we know, it's the only three he's killed. But I'm thinking, with, he did attempt to dump the bodies and hide them, which we should mention in sort of the timeline of evolving serial killers. Usually when they first start out, they don't do that. That happens as a oops, I almost got caught, and it gets fixed later. So that's why it's so critical to catch these killers when they first start, because the more they go, the better they get at it, and it becomes nearly impossible. That's how Gary Ridgway lasted over 30 years, and the Golden State Killer lasted over 40, I think. Zodiac's never been found. As they get better. So I'm thinking I'm wondering, I should say, with the extent he went through and the methods he used to dispose of the bodies and hide them, and then also cover his tracks, so he thought, by leaving the brochure in the car and everything else. I'm wondering if this was his first time, because it doesn't seem like it was. And he had a ruse, the boat ride.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen out of the gate either. That's developed later.
No, and so for those that don't understand, that Tampa Bay is connected to the Gulf, right?
Yes.
And so we have sharks. We have things that can definitely destroy evidence. So depends on how long he was here and how well he was able to hide his crimes. He was able to destroy evidence. He could have been able to destroy evidence for a while, right? And so is this the only time he got caught?
Mm.
So there's currently a case going on right now, and we're not going to talk about it today in detail, but there is currently a attorney who was murdered, and the going theory right now is that his body was tossed into the ocean in different pieces to destroy,
Dexter,
to destroy the evidence. So could be a future episode for us here on Evolution of Evil, as it does touch on Tampa Bay.
I'm interested.
Yes. So, TJ, this is where we would normally end our episode. So we're about 40 minutes in, and I thank everyone for listening to this episode. But I promised a twofer episode.
You did. And
a twofer is what I'm going to deliver. We discussed previously how we wanted to take listener suggestions and incorporate it into our show. Well, here is where that comes into play for this episode. Our listeners and good friends, Diane and Tony, suggested that we would cover another local Tampa murder. This one happened in 2000. Now, Diane and Tony here have been and are like family. I went to high school with their daughter and have been best friends with her ever since. As a matter of fact, yesterday, which was the 4th of June, was our 24th anniversary from our graduation.
Wow.
So as I sat on their front porch, they recounted why this would make for a great episode. Now, Diane and Tony started off by saying this was all over the news in May of 2000 due to the murder as well as what happened after. The crazier part was that they had seen the eventually convicted murderer the night before and actually interacted with them prior, noting at the time they seemed off.
Whoa.
So now to the story. Once upon a quiet May evening, the Freeman household was enveloped in an atmosphere of tranquility. Constance Freeman, a graceful woman with a heart full of dreams, stood before a bathroom mirror, gently washing her face. Meanwhile, her husband, Grover Cleveland Freeman, rested comfortably on their waterbed in the Carrollwood home, blissfully unaware of the events that were about to unfold. Suddenly, the peaceful silence was shattered by alarming sounds. Constance's heart skipped a beat as her ears captured the chilling echoes of voices and the unmistakable discharge of rapid gunshots. Fear gripped her soul, for she recognized her husband's voice crying out in agony amidst the chaos. In a matter of moments, 16 bullets from a 9mm semi-automatic pistol relentlessly found their mark on Grover Freeman's body. The lawyer, a pillar of the community at the age of 54, had the wounds inflicted upon him with tragic resilience. 8 bullets tore into his legs. 5 found their home in his chest, and 3 pierced his left arm. As the bullets pierced his flesh, they also punctured the waterbed, causing liquid to saturate the upper floors of their 2-story house.
So wait, he was shot 16 times with 9mm?
Yep.
That guy reloaded.
So it was, yeah.
Just so you know.
8 bullets tore into his leg, 5, so 13 times he was hit.
As a military man,
yeah,
and someone familiar with weapons, that whoever was shooting that 9mm reloaded. Because there's no way he went 16 for 16.
Well, let's hear who it was. So the gruesome details of his death or his final moments and the aftermath that followed were meticulously chronicled in a hefty stack of records. Basically about 268 pages in the court docs. These records, recently made public by Hillsborough County State Attorney's Office, offered a chilling glimpse into the harrowing sequence of events that unfolded on that fateful evening. Amidst the wealth of information, one question remained hauntingly unanswered. What drove this 6-minute reign of terror? The motive behind the rampage that shattered their lives was a lingering enigma, an unsolved puzzle that continued to torment those seeking closure. Now, here's where we meet the murderer. Catherine King Freeman, Grover Freeman's ex-wife of 4 years, was incarcerated without bail. She was held captive by the accusation. They accused her of first-degree murder, attempted murder of Constance Freeman, and the armed burglary. The state, seeking the ultimate retribution, yearned for nothing short of a death penalty for Catherine.
It was the ex-wife?
It was the ex-wife.
Oh. I did not see that coming.
Now, the current wife recounted her chilling tale to the deputies tasked with unraveling the mysteries that unfolded. So, seeking solace from the bullets that shattered their peace, Constance sought solace with the confines of the bathroom closet. However, that was short-lived. Catherine found her, discovered her hiding place, and with a venomous threat hanging in the air, Catherine seized Constance by her flowing tresses, assaulting her mercilessly with the butt of the pistol. So she pistol whipped her, pretty much. Blow after blow rained down upon Constance's head and body as the walls bore witness to this horrifying struggle. Now defiance welled up within Constance, and she summoned enough strength to fight back against her. 2 women fought their way in the bedroom, the struggle continuing. Ultimately, in an act of self-preservation, Constance sank her teeth into Catherine's face. A desperate attempt to loosen her grip. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled determination, she managed to break free, fleeing from the clutches of her deranged attacker. Now alone and terrified, Constance sought refuge in the sanctuary of a neighbor's house, her heart pounding, met with an unanswered door. Her prayers for assistance were finally answered when she reached a trusted friend's house nearby. There, she found the courage to dial 911, urgently pleading for help at 11:45 p.m. Simultaneously, in the throes of anguish and desperation, Grover Freeman himself managed to reach out to emergency services before succumbing to his grievous wounds. Though the veil of pain, he pleaded for his assistance, help, shot, help, he gasped, struggling to convey the horror that had been following him. Help, shot, ex-wife, help me. Ah. Now, responding to the distress calls, deputies swiftly mobilized, launching a relentless search for Catherine Freeman, the woman at the center of this tragic tale. Now, at around midnight, their footsteps echoed through the halls of the residence, less than a mile away from her ex-husband's now blood-stained abode. Her stepmother, Jane Keene, played an unwittingly role in the unfolding drama. She was awakened by the commotion, ventured into Catherine's room only to find it empty. No trace of her troubled stepdaughter at all. In her statement to the deputies, King revealed that earlier in the evening, Catherine had joined her and Grover Freeman's 13-year-old daughter for dinner. It was a seemingly ordinary family gathering, followed by mundane rituals such as bathing a friend's baby and tucking her own daughter into bed precisely at 10 p.m.
So let me try to get this straight. So these two get divorced, and Catherine and Grover, which is a phenomenal name, and Catherine is now living with her stepmother.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I was confused there for a second. Do we know how old Catherine and Grover
are? Grover, I think I just said earlier, but
I've been so busy trying to analyze this stuff and ask questions in my own head that I might have missed it. And by the way, folks, if you're listening to this, the way we do this show is we don't research the other person's stuff beforehand. This is the first I've heard about it, so we just kind of I kind of wing the questions here on my end.
So
that's why I say things, and then Justin repeats me right after that because I didn't know it was coming.
So Catherine, I know, was 43 at the time because I remember seeing that. Oh, he was 54.
So 54 and 43, and she's living with her stepmother.
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I got all that nailed down here before I move on.
That's all right. Got to get back to my notes. So, but as the night descended into chaos, Catherine Freeman, a day trader by profession, vanished into the darkness.
Wait, she's a day trader and she's living with her stepmother?
Yes. Well, you never know. Things happen, right?
Wow.
So, like a phantom, she slipped through the fingers of those pursuing her, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and shattered lives. Now, dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale glow upon the scene of this tragic saga. As the sun's rays began to pierce the morning mist, authorities made a chilling discovery atop the Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Try saying that 3 times fast. A green Cadillac Catera registered in Catherine Freeman's name. Now, for those unfamiliar, the Sunshine Skyway is probably one of the tallest bridges in Tampa. So this vehicle, like a silent sentinel, stood witness to the depths of despair that had driven its owner to unimaginable deaths. With a heart-wrenching plunge, Catherine had hurled herself from the heights, plummeting 175 feet into the icy waters of Tampa Bay. Believe it or not, she survived the devastating impact, though not unscathed. TJ, she broke both of her legs, her pelvis was fractured, and she clung tenaciously to life. Now confined to the medical wing of the Morgan Street jail, she faced the artist's task of piecing together her shattered existence. Now, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the Cadillac Catera, by the way, if you don't know, is a hideous car. I just Googled it, and it's ugly. Definitely not one of Cadillac's brighter moments.
We can't win it all, TJ.
That's correct.
Amidst the remnants of this tragic episode, law enforcement officers meticulously combed through the fragments of the puzzle. Their investigation yielded a chilling revelation. A 9mm Taurus semi-automatic handgun, airily discarded upon a couch in Grover Freeman's master bedroom. The weapon, jammed and spent, told a silent tale of violence and destruction. One bullet remained in the magazine, a solitary reminder of the shots that had echoed through the night. Nearby, a discarded magazine lay strewn upon its floor, its purpose served.
There you go. See, I don't look at his notes before. I just blurt stuff out.
Tracing the origins of the weapon led authorities on a winding path, all the way to a man in Georgia who had initially owned the firearm. He revealed that he had sold it on April 30th, a mere 2 weeks prior to the tragedy. A woman who matched Catherine Freeman's description and drove a green Cadillac,
Oh, and it was green.
had responded to his classified advertisement in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Their meeting, shrouded in the shadows of a restaurant parking lot in Duluth, Georgia, culminated in the exchange of the gun and accompanying magazines for the sum of $500. This deadly instrument found its way into the hands of a woman whose intentions would forever remain a haunting mystery.
I've always wondered that too. Like, if you're an under-the-table gun salesman, when somebody comes and buys a gun from you, you have to know why they're buying it.
I would think you should be charged just as much, right?
Well, of course.
So,
But we can't have that discussion yet. But I mean, you have to know why they're buying it. Nobody buys a gun illegally for defense. That's just not a thing.
yeah, you would have to ask questions, right?
Well, I mean, you don't in that line of work. That's how you become good at it. But I
But
mean,
you just try not to.
I mean, you might get the occasional person who's like, maybe back in the day, like the mob's after me. I need a gun right now. I don't have time for the background check to go through, whatever. But I mean, for the most part, these guns are not being bought for self-defense.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing was this man, despite his cooperation, could not positively identify Catherine from a line of photographs. Now, that's why the investigation continued, driven by a burning desire to uncover the truth and shed light on a dark recess of a soul consumed by violence. It's crazy. As the story of Catherine Freeman's heinous crimes continued to unfold, a shocking revelation emerged. After ruthlessly ending her ex-husband's life and attempting to take out the new Mrs. Freeman, she embarked on a desperate and ill-fated escape. Fleeing the scene of her monstrous deeds, Catherine found herself perched atop the Skyway Bridge. I still can't believe she jumped 175 feet. I mean, it kills me.
It didn't kill her.
No. So she ended up pleading guilty and was not born out of remorse or sordid moral awakening. It was a calculated move, a desperate bid to evade the specter of death sentence that loomed over her. The trial marked a profound shift in her fate, and she had previously attempted suicide following the brutal attack on her ex-husband and his wife. Fate, it seemed, had other plans, and Catherine's survival would now be intertwined with the confines of prison walls. Connie Freeman, the brave survivor of Catherine's assault, stood before the court, her voice filled with a sense of measured acceptance. She acknowledged Catherine's decision to take responsibility for her crime, embracing the knowledge that justice had been served. There was no trace of bitterness in her words, no desire for vengeance. Instead, Connie spoke of moving forward, of honoring the memory of her late husband and reclaiming her own life, unburdened by the weight of hatred. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the prosecutor painted a vivid picture of Catherine's motive, an insatiable thirst for money. Crushed under a mountain of debt, she saw a grim solution in the demise of her ex-husband and his wife. The allure of an inheritance, the prospect of financial liberation, drove her to orchestrate this nightmarish act of violence.
On what planet do you get life insurance if your ex-husband dies?
Think about it. She's got a daughter with the guy, so her daughter would inherit everything, right? So
unless his wife.
She was trying to take both of them out. Yep. So her life had been steeped in opulence, even as her debts multiplied and her financial prospects dwindled. vacations to far-flung destinations, a lifestyle of extravagance, all fueled by the twisted desire for wealth at any cost.
Also explains why she was living with her stepmother.
Yep.
Now, if you're listening to the show and you're like, boy, I need money fast. Oh, I know, I'll kill someone for their life insurance. That has literally worked 0 times. So just find something you're good at and open up an Etsy store or something like that. This has never worked, ever.
Now, as justice pursued her for these recent crimes, new revelations surfaced. Detectives delved into her past, unearthing the mysterious 1983 shooting of her former boyfriend, Ronald Heinlein. A cloud of suspicion lingered, though no official confirmation of Catherine's involvement was released. In a final act of accountability, the court placed a lien on Catherine's assets, ensuring that she would repay the taxpayers for the cost of her defense. The magnitude of the case had consumed countless hours and incurred significant expenses, a testament to the extent of the crimes committed. Now, with this chapter of the... so this wraps up our twofer episode covering the murders in Tampa Bay area. While one covered a serial killer who put fear and panic into the community, while the others was the shocking and grisly events that unfolded within the Freeman household and reverberated through the tight-knit community of Tampa Bay, sending shockwaves and disbelief and horror. This was the community known for its tranquility and idyllic neighborhoods, where families found solace and security. But on that fateful night, the veil of serenity was ripped apart, revealing a darkness that lurked beneath the surface. And that is the twofer episode of Tampa Bay.
That's so 2 good ones. Also, I should be noted that we're 14 episodes in. You've already done 3 serial killers from Tampa, and I did one that was close. Y'all might want to move.
Well, they don't call us Florida Man for nothing, right?
Florida, that's absolutely true. You know what's funny is when I started, I'm going to take credit for this. When I first started doing the radio show I had in 2014, every day I would read just outlandish news stories because all my shows were recorded except for Saturday morning was live. And I would just read outrageous news stories. And I noticed that like 75% of my stories were from Florida. So I never said Florida Man. I would just always say, here's another one from Florida. So I was on to something. I just didn't know it yet.
Well, it's just because it's not cool to say an Iowa man or the person from Illinois.
Well, so like you would read some very funny crime stories from Iowa, like, man gets stuck in a chimney naked upside down or some stuff like that. That's where you read those. Right. Then you come across Florida, like, man loses 8 crocodiles in the sewage tunnel. You're like, what the hell is going on down there? Florida's a crocodile or a snake.
Florida's new motto is "We do batshit crazy right."
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
we have all the bats.
Yes.
But this happens more often than it really should. This financial land of despair. There's seemingly no, but again, she's a day trader. That's what throws me off. Her debt had to have been outrageous.
I was going to say, TJ, we've covered it. There's bad people in every occupation.
Yes, but I'm just saying to be a day trader and then to be divorced and to be essentially in such financial black hole that this is what you think you have to do to get out of it. She must have been terrible at it for one thing, because most good day traders, this wouldn't have happened because that she'd be loaded. But also, like this, how is it the answer always is, oh, I know, I'll kill him and then I'll just take the life insurance. That doesn't work ever.
Well, I would just chalk it up to not watching enough Lifetime movie network shows. But then again, money is the root of all evil, right? And at the end of the day, when pushed into a corner, I think it makes people snap. It shows the true intentions of someone at that point. I
Well,
think
it's the land of desperation, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, in this case, it ended up in murder. So,
and this is completely different. Now, she is an evil for sure, but she's a different kind. She's not, an Oba Chandler we discussed at the beginning of the show, or she's not a Belle Gunnis from our first episode, or Danny Rowling, or Eileen Wuornos, or any of these people we've discussed previously. Really, I mean, because we've just so far on this show, we've discussed even Jimmy Savile, who didn't kill anybody, but was committing underage sexual assaults and rapes for over 50 years in England, using a celebrity to do that. They're calculated. There's a plan in place. There's fail safes in place. There's backstops. All these things. They are cold, calculated, ingenuitive criminals, killers, rapists, whatever the case is. Then there's this. I would essentially call this a crime of desperation or a crime of passion. I actually think they're linked. They're similar.
yes.
You either become so desperate or so angered or in such an emotional state, you do things you would normally otherwise would not do. However, like you just said, there are two times in a person's life where true intentions do come out. A, drunkenness. One of the things I was told in the military is drunk words speak sober thoughts. And B is desperation. Because you can act and put on personas and bravados and things like that. When you're faced in desperation mode and you have to react, the true you is going to come out, whether you want it to or not. And yes, most people would not, try to solve their financial hardships by committing murder, but she did. So that means that ability was always there. Because, first of all, if she just would have had a rational thought about it, she really thought it was like, again, is it ideal living with your stepmother? No, but you do have a roof over your head. Your daughter is being taken care of. Maybe you sit down one day and you just go, maybe I should file bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And just start over again. But I don't know. And again, maybe it's just you live this lavish lifestyle and all of a sudden one day it's snatched away and the person who you got to live that life with finds someone else. You're still alone. You're broke and you're just like, that's not fair. But I don't know. I think there's the financial aspect is definitely there. I also think there's a jealousy factor in this as well, because essentially she was just replaced.
Yeah.
Which, if you notice, lifestyles of the rich and famous, that happens a lot. Oh, you want to leave? I'll just go find another one. Which is why most rich people are just boring as shit to talk to.
It's a good thing we're not rich.
No, absolutely not by any stretch of the imagination.
Too funny.
Two good ones here. I like this. This was good.
I am anxious to hear what you've got up your sleeves for our next episode.
So the next episode, I'm going to do the murder of Phil Hartman. So if you are unaware of who Phil Hartman is, A, you should be ashamed of yourself, and B, he was a staple on Saturday Night Live back when it was funny in the late 80s and early 90s. He was also Troy McClure on The Simpsons. He did everything. He was on, what was the TV show about a radio station he did. That was
Talk radio.
Yes, that was supposed to be his break. Joe Rogan was on it, and then he was killed during that show. We covered it once on Filter Free Podcast, but it's been so long now that we don't ever, even in the structure of that show, we don't go into the detail we go here. So I'm gonna do the murder of Phil Hartman, but listening to your story, your hometown, I only have, outside of Belle Gunnis, I only have one other hometown murder that I could do. And that was in 1993. Her name was Raina Risen. She was 16 years old. She was killed. Found her in the woods outside of South Bend, Indiana, here down the road. My sister was actually friends with her. And it kind of reared its ugly head a couple of years ago because the man everyone thought did it was convicted and found guilty. But I think what I'm going to try to do with that, because it's very difficult for a local murder case like that to get enough information to really make it worthwhile of doing. So I think what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to get a hold of the journalist who covered the story of the conviction and see if they would be willing to come on and discuss that with us, because it's a sad story. But yeah, so I'm going to work on getting a journalist here on the show that covered the murder of Raina Risen here in LaPorte eventually. But the next show will be the murder of Phil Hartman.
Well, I think if you dig a little harder, you will find there's more crimes and murders in LaPorte than what you think. But
oh yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we just found out a couple of years ago the fire chief of the fire department my mom was a volunteer firefighter on for 8 years when I was a child. Me and my sister were both children, is a convicted sex offender now, the pedophile. So that's great. So one day, I don't know if I want to cover Jeff Kaufman though, because I think I would just get angry. So.
Yeah, I think we need to stay away from that for a while. So
yeah. So I next is Phil Hartman, but I'm going to work on getting a hold of a journalist that covered the murder of Raina Risen so we can discuss that one day. So
that works. Well, TJ, send us out.
Well, Nat, we'll see you next week for Justin Yent. That's him. I'm TJ Stevens. We will see you next week right here on The Evolution of Evil.
The views expressed on this podcast are ours alone and do not reflect the views of our employers.
Evolution of Evil.
I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. Person would drink it, fall asleep. That's when they would be strangled.
Do you have a boyfriend?
No.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
'Cause I want to know who I'm looking at.
Evil is not spurned. Evil is thought of as a spirit that needs help.
Believe me, if I started murdering people, there'd be none of you left.